Speaking of things that are contagious, let's talk about vaccines for a minute. You might remember a recent episode of our podcast where we talked to virologist Paul Dupré. He's the director for the Center of Vaccine Research at the University of Pittsburgh and a professor of microbiology and cellular genetics. We pushed him on the question of why, from a scientific perspective, he thinks it's important for people to be vaccinated. And other than the herd immunity he talked about last time, he had some really interesting insights on who can and can't get vaccinated and what that means. We thought the science was really interesting, so we wanted to share it today, and we hope you find it as interesting as we did. Here's what Paul told us.
In some ways, vaccination for me is a social contract. People who have a healthy immune system can easily and readily and safely be vaccinated with MMR. It doesn't matter that there's one virus, two viruses, three viruses. Your immune system is a fantastic system. It can deal with lots of assaults at the same time. So someone who's vaccinated with measles, mumps, rubella mounts a really, really good response. And if we vaccinate them twice, as I said already, 97% of the people will be protected. But that's not the case for everyone in society. There are some people in society who don't have a healthy immune response or a really functional immune system. Why would someone have a dysfunctional immune system? Well, think of a small child who has to have a transplant. That small kid gets a transplant from a donor that's not themselves. So therefore, to stop that transplant being rejected, we have to give them drugs which suppress their immune system so that they don't reject the tissue that they've got, because they need that tissue to stay alive. But the problem then for that child is they can't be vaccinated. So therefore, those people who are immune suppressed, who can't be vaccinated, for me, whenever I say vaccination is a social contract, broader society needs to protect those individuals who can't be vaccinated by believing in the power of vaccination to stop the transmission, so that that little kid who has the heart transplant, lung transplant, kidney transplant, whatever sort of transplant, or just has some sort of severe immunodeficiency, some genetic deficiency, doesn't have to meet that virus, because people here forget that measles is a deadly disease and needs to be protected against.
Absolutely, and that's before you even mention the babies that are too young to be vaccinated. You don't get your shots until you're 2 or 3, and babies are super weak, right?
Well, those babies are actually super weak and super strong in some ways.
Oh.
The reason why those babies are super strong is because the mums who have been vaccinated, or who some mums have also had the disease, the mums transfer antibodies across the placenta into the babies, and those antibodies are sufficient to protect against a measles infection in very, very young babies.
Wow.
But the reason why we have to give measles vaccine later on is actually because of those fantastic antibodies that come across from the mum. Because over time, the mum's antibodies, as the baby gets bigger, get diluted and diluted and diluted and diluted and disappear. So therefore, those antibodies no longer protect, which means that kid then becomes susceptible to measles disease. And that's why we have to look at how those antibodies wane, the mum's antibodies wane in the child, and determine when is the best time to give the vaccine. Because if you give the vaccine too early, those antibodies will stop the vaccine working. But if you give the vaccine too late, the kid might have met the disease, which again is another argument to stop endemic transmission, because we can make sure that the antibodies have gone from the mum. We can then know that measles is not circulating, so the kid's not going to meet it anyway in this part of the world. And then we can vaccinate them, and then we can get them good antibodies, which means if the kids want to go to a part of the world with their parents on vacation, move to a different country, do whatever the kid does, that the parents can contentedly and safely bring their kids to the parts of the world where measles has not been eliminated. And that's the risk of measles coming back in this part of the world, because kids who have not been vaccinated, whose antibodies are waning maybe a little bit quicker or a little bit slower, because remember, everybody's different, those kids can be protected.